Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. I'm Ben,
And I'm Athena.
and this is episode 179. All right, Athena, today we are talking about compassion fatigue. But before we start talking about compassion fatigue, this is the first time that we've done a podcast together. So I'm particularly excited. Well, we have technically done a
Technically.
couple podcasts on the Where Do You Get Your Protein podcast that I was doing with Sawyer for a bit. But this is the first Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels podcast that we've done together. So that's exciting. I would love to know what's new
Yes.
with you and how your day has been, and then we can get into the topic for today.
Very exciting. Yeah, so my day's been long, so we'll leave it at that, but it's okay. It's another day. It's done. It's over with. We just went on a trip together, and that was really fun. We went on a trip to Tannersville, New York, which is middle of nowhere, nothing to do, like not a lot to do, which is what we wanted. And we just had this big house with 12 vegans total, and it was so fun. We had lots of good food. There was a hot tub, a pool. We went to Catskills Animal Sanctuary, and yeah, I'm still on the thrill of that, and I am so excited to do that again. How are you? How's your day? And how was the trip for you?
Good. My day has been hot. It's 95 degrees here in Boston and humid. So there's that. But the trip was amazing. I really loved getting some bonding time in with all of you guys because y'all live a little bit closer than I do. I know that you're also kind of a little bit more on the outskirts, being in Jersey and a lot of people being in the city. But coming down from Boston, I don't get to see everyone as much. So I know I visited you and Brennan. Try to do it like once during the summer, at least each year. And I've seen Ryan a couple times recently, but everyone else I don't get to see too frequently, or I was meeting for the first time. So that was super cool. It's always just a different vibe when you arrive and you feel like these are my people. And that is something that you can cultivate online, but it just hits a little bit differently in person, especially when it's the little things like you don't have to worry about is this vegan or is that vegan, or there isn't like this negotiation at meal times. Everyone kind of feels like you're coming from a common place of understanding. And I think when you just have like shared values or shared passions with people before you've even spent time with them, there's automatically that connection, and it becomes really easy to build a relationship or a friendship upon that kind of like mutual sharing of values. And so that was really awesome. You guys picked such a beautiful spot, and you and Emma did an amazing job planning the whole trip. I feel like it was a good blend of chilling and also going to do stuff. Going out to the sanctuary was an amazing time. And then cooking meals together, just hanging out and having really awesome conversations and playing fun little games. So yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah, that was a beautiful way to sum it up. It was awesome, and it's always amazing to be with vegan friends. So if you don't have any, there is hope. A little more hope if you live near a big city, but there's still hope. Lots of ways to find vegan friends through Facebook groups. Happy Cow even has a community now. Vegly if you're dating. The list goes on, but I hope you can all find your community because it really is an amazing experience. We all found each other through different ways, a lot of mutual friends, a lot of just different connections coming together. So it was definitely worthwhile. And we plan on making an annual thing. So it was a great time. So I'm very excited about it too. But today we are talking about compassion fatigue. Woo!
Yay,
Yeah,
exciting.
exciting stuff, which all of us vegans have experienced. Unfortunately, actually, even if you're not vegan, most people, well, I think everyone's experienced it to an extent. Um, yeah, so we're gonna get into that.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that was relevant for me recently, kind of tying it back to that trip, was a conversation that I had with one of our friends there, and she was talking about what she does currently for work and saying that she at one point was working for a I can't remember the exact company it was, but whatever her role was, it was within an animal rights organization, um, or maybe it was just kind of more peripherally tied, like it was a shelter or something like that.
I
Um,
think I know what you're
and
talking about. It was a animal rights organization.
it was an animal rights organization, yeah. And I think one of the points that we brought up during the conversation was the fact that we've noticed a trend among vegan businesses or organizations or companies where sometimes, and this is certainly not always the case, but sometimes there can be this almost, hey, we all have to bear the burden together. Um, we're doing it for the animals, so it's okay for us to run ourselves into the ground because, we care so much about this issue. It's an emotionally charged issue for a lot of us. And hey, like, maybe the hours aren't ideal, or maybe you're going beyond your job description, or maybe whatever it is that would maybe typically not be required at your regular 9 to 5, or would be an expectation, is almost like this subliminal message of, hey, do a little bit more. You can, like, we can all give a little bit more. And I think that that kind of, whether it's outright stated or not, messaging can really lead somebody towards burnout and that compassion fatigue, where it's like you get to the end of the day and you maybe have said, like, justified to yourself, yeah, it's okay for me to overwork myself because it's for this cause, but then you kind of end up not hating or having disdain for, but like just kind of feeling this like numbness towards the cause that you once felt so strongly about. Um, and obviously, this isn't unique, like you said, to vegans. You can experience this. Like healthcare is a really common place that I've heard it. Like friends who are nurses. When I was in school, I studied exercise science, and I had a lot of shared classes with nurses or people who are dealing more kind of in inpatient settings. And everyone has a little bit of a different experience and a different tolerance, I guess you could say. But I think if you're not really being mindful about how, and it doesn't have to be work, but work, I think, is one place where this comes up a lot, the workplace is affecting you, then you might find yourself in a position where a job that you once loved and a cause that you once cared deeply about kind of just starts to become something that doesn't have that same you don't have that same vigor for anymore. Is that something that you've heard from people or experienced yourself at all?
Yeah, so I actually used to work in healthcare. So I used to work in the hospital, and now I work for an animal rights organization. So I definitely have all the points of views on compassion fatigue. I'm gonna pull up a definition just because I feel like it's sometimes helpful for me and others to just have it laid out. So this definition is just from Google. And it just says, while burnout and compassion fatigue are related, they are different. Burnout is the physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion from prolonged and excessive work related stress. Compassion fatigue results from internalizing and being impacted by the emotions and trauma of those who are suffering. So, like you said, in healthcare, people are suffering. In animal rights organizations, animals are suffering. So, compassion fatigue is the result of being impacted, seeing all of those that are suffering around you. So when I was in healthcare, it's so interesting because I would say I definitely like compassion fatigue working in both industries are going to happen to an extent. And I feel like with animals though, it's something that it's like such a bigger trigger, and I think that's because animals just have no idea what's going on, and you can't, like, explain things to them, they have no understanding. So, like, when I was in the hospital, I did notice that I started to, um I wouldn't say I lacked like, I never there was never a point where I was lacking empathy or, like, where that feeling of, like, you know, wanting to help someone ever goes away, but you do start to feel like you do start to become so much more immune to the suffering around you that it almost becomes kind of normal. It's just like, okay, yeah, people are suffering every single day. This happens. Like you're suffering, they're suffering, everyone's suffering, and that is how it is when you're working in a hospital. Everyone is really, really hurting, and I don't think your compassion never truly goes away for anyone, of course, and your empathy never goes away for anyone. But you do start to your feelings do become kind of how you were saying, like just a little bit more minimized. Just like, okay, same thing, different day, and, with animal rights, I think it's very similar. It's like you see this happened to this animal, this happened to that animal, this happened to this animal, all the things, and it does become just like you're just taking so much in, taking so much suffering in that eventually it's just like, okay, like, I've seen enough, I've heard enough, like, whatever, I'm done with this. And you still feel compassion, you still feel empathy, but it's so tough to take it in every day that I think we start to disassociate a little bit maybe with the reality of just like, okay, I just don't even wanna deal with this today, I don't wanna see this today. Um, but I think your examples are great because it's very true that I also do think animal rights organizations and any organization that has a good cause or good mission tends to use that against their employees of like, okay, well, if you care about the cause, then why don't you put in the work? And it's like, you need to also have balance because you're never going to be able to put in like your full self and your full heart into something when you don't have the time or the energy for it. So yeah, I think everything you said was great, and you gave great examples too.
No, and I appreciate you providing the definition and the difference, the distinction between those 2 things, because there is a difference. Like, it might be subtle, but it was something that I didn't even realize until you kinda just clarified it there, so that was really helpful, and I think there is a lot of nuance between these different things. Like you said, there's almost a little bit of a dissociation, and one of the things that I was thinking about was, as vegans, when you decide to make a change to your lifestyle that limits to the extent that you can, the cruelty and the suffering that we inflict on animals, that often I think is spurred on from some sort of event, whether that be you watch a documentary or it's maybe a culmination of lots of things over the years, these little realizations and these little events that add up. And I think that once you make that decision for yourself, of course, it's a decision that you have to continue to make, but I think it's a common experience for many vegans that it's almost like this light switch moment where you go from saying like, okay, I've tolerated enough of this. It's time for me to take a stand and stand up for what I believe in and decide that like from this day forward, this is the way that I'm choosing to live my life. And I think that sometimes at least speaking for myself, from my own experience, it's almost like you go on this journey from, okay, you make that decision and then you become the angry vegan and you become the person who starts telling all your friends and family about all the awful things that are happening. This was me at least, and I'm like, guys, like I know I was the biggest meat eater out of all my friends, and so like when I told them this, they were shocked, and then I told my family. My family were actually pretty open and accepting, which I'm grateful for. But you go from like being this angry vegan who's outraged, and you're talking about it all the time. And then over time, I think people get used to that. Maybe you get a little bit tired of the debates, the conversations, and then it's almost like once I made that decision, I knew like deep down, like this deep knowing that I was never going to go back to eating animal products again. Or it's not just eating, consuming animal products in any sense. But I guess the point that I'm trying to get to is you almost become desensitized, I think, in a way, and you like, now when if I watch, like, one of these documentaries, it's like sometimes every, like, 6 months or a year, I will rewatch one of them, and it's almost like it kind of reinvigorates or reminds me why I am vegan, or it's like I see something like one of these videos, which is a whole 'nother topic I wonder that I actually just thought of right now is, like, how do you think social media impacts compassion fatigue, especially if feeding yourself like videos from slaughterhouses or animal rights, animal activism stuff, content. A lot of people who feel really deeply and are really angry and are really outspoken, how is that impacting you and your mental health, and your ability to be an effective advocate or your ability to even just remain vegan? So that's something that I think about is like I almost feel like sometimes I become numb and not forget why I am doing what I'm doing, but it's almost like it's helpful to have that reminder. And I also respect the fact that some people who are vegan never want to see those things again because they just, it's not something that, it's traumatic to watch it happen for them, and I can totally respect that as well. Um, yeah, and like you said, you almost have to dissociate in order to not feel like, oh my God, how does the rest of the world not see this and have that really like eat at you? What are your thoughts on that? Was a very long monologue there. What
Oh,
are
that's okay.
I
Mine
mean,
was also long.
what's coming to mind?
Yeah, I think social media is an interesting topic to bring up into it. I think compassion fatigue, like I guess instead of saying, which I'm the one who said it, but instead of saying dissociation, it's kind of like an emotional withdrawal where you're taking in so much that eventually you're just like, no, nope. I'm taking my emotions back and I'm just not there anymore. But I think it can be very overwhelming, especially with social media, like you said. And nowadays, we can experience compassion fatigue in just so many different ways. Social media is such an unnatural way to be experiencing our emotions because one second we're watching a video that's making us laugh and crack up. We scroll once and it's like now we're crying because we're watching this video about this dog that got saved, and now we're crying even more because this alligator was killed, and now we're happy again because we're watching a comedian. It's just such an unnatural way for us to be experiencing our emotions, which I think that also does play into compassion fatigue of seeing so much sadness kind of spread into our day without us even realizing it. If you're on social media, it's pretty interesting. And I haven't done much research on the studies of how it affects us necessarily in that way, but I'm sure there have been studies, and if there haven't been many, I'm sure they're gonna be coming out in a matter of time. But compassion fatigue really there are signs as well, like um, being very stressed. Like when you first go vegan, I think, like you said, you are really like amped up and you're just like ready to go. Like, I'm vegan. This is why I saw these documentaries, I saw these videos, I read all these things. Like, you're ready. But after years and years of being vegan, you're tired. And that's kind of where that emotional withdrawal comes in. But, with real compassion fatigue, it would be feeling very stressed, maybe not taking care of yourself very much, blaming others, especially like in the hospital. I think it's people kind of, I wouldn't say people do it often, but starting to blame others for their suffering, I think is something that can happen, especially for people that you might quote unquote consider like a drug seeker or etc. You do start to kind of blame others for their own suffering, which isn't necessarily fair. With animals, I don't know that that's necessarily as common just because why are we gonna blame the animals? Come on, they're not doing that. But and just, kind of complaining about life all the time, complaining how hard life is and how awful life is. Like those are all definitely big signs of compassion fatigue, maybe not being able to sleep as well. It's a tough one, especially with such a big topic like veganism, because the thing is, it's like, well, anything honestly, veganism, healthcare, health problems aren't going away. Animals being killed isn't going away overnight. Like it's just not happening. So I think it's really, really easy to experience that compassion fatigue because at the end of the day, we're mostly seeing the negatives. We're not seeing all the positives that have been happening because we want to keep the movement going. So we don't focus on those positive things and those good things that have happened. But there's been so many good things that have happened, especially in the vegan movement. Like, I mean, there's just the amount of vegan food that's available nowadays is absolutely insane. The fact that like most beauty products are now vegan and cruelty free. There's just like the circuses stopped using animals, like the biggest ones like Ringling Bros. There's so many good things, but then there's also so many bad things. And when we only focus on those things, I think that's when really compassion fatigue can really, really set in and can make us angry, like you said, which is another side, like another sign. I'm like, oh yeah, we're friggin' angry. Um, and yeah, I think that is now my long-winded response to your thoughts, but I think social media does have a big impact, because we're seeing so many negatives, and we take that in. So
Hey, we can just keep monologuing back and forth. That's cool with me. No, I like the way this is going. I think that one point, like you brought up when you were talking about in healthcare setting, maybe we end up taking out our frustration or that lack of compassion shows in the way that we interact with the patients that we're working with, or potentially, I guess, even like coworkers. If you feel like, hey, usually I'm like, we're all a team, we're in this together, but you might, if you start to suffer from compassion fatigue, maybe it's like, oh no, this person's not helping enough and I'm over, um, just like less tolerance, I guess, for coworkers and less compassion for maybe what they're experiencing as well. And then I also was like, before you said it, I was thinking about like, well, how would that apply to animals? Because obviously, like, we can't, we're not going to take it out on them. But I think
yeah.
it maybe the way it would manifest would be lack of compassion for people who don't understand veganism or don't understand that
Mm,
cause. And that can also, I think, be detrimental because if we aren't coming to those conversations from a place of groundedness and a place of compassion, then we're probably not entering the conversation in a way that is going to lead to a productive outcome or a productive back and forth. Because yeah, if we're coming in like with no compassion for the other person, like compassion, when I think of compassion, I think of like kind of trying to put yourself in that person's shoes, and like understand maybe that all their life experiences have led them to the point where they are right now. You don't know, obviously, like nearly as much about that person as they know about themselves. And so it's coming from a place of open mindedness. We weren't all vegan at one point. We had to get to that point. So trying to remember those things, but all of those, like, and then also understanding that, hey, when I come into this conversation, there are ways that maybe I can frame things that will put them in less of a defensive position. All these things that you might consider when trying to have a conversation with somebody who maybe hasn't quite understood the argument for veganism. You might just that might just all go out the window if you're suffering from compassion fatigue. You're just like, F you, you're not getting it. Like, you need to get with it. Like, just go watch this freaking Earthling Ed talk and you'll understand, or something like that. Um, and that I think that can be harmful as well, just from a bringing people to the cause. But another instance I thought about while you were talking was like maybe teachers working with young children or anyone who works maybe in
mm,
daycare or something like that. I could see that being tough because if you're working with children, children are, it's kind of like this, not this like midway point, but it's almost like kind of human, but almost like has these like um obviously humans are animals, but like animal like quality as well, in that they don't have fully mental capabilities amongst them, so they might not be treating you in the way that you want to be treated. And obviously you can't really take your frustrations out on the kids, so that's a hard one as well. Like, you can't really be like snippy or talk back to the kids in the way that maybe you could a patient. I mean, you can, but
yeah,
usually that
patient.
doesn't work out too well. And I think the last thing that I wanted to say was I thought the point that you brought up about combating compassion fatigue, because like how do we work to remedy this? How can we like recognize the signs and symptoms, and maybe how can we take steps to minimize it? Because I don't think you can ever completely eliminate it. I almost feel like it's like a meter, like it starts filling up, filling up, filling up, or like a bucket, and then it gets to a tipping point, and that's when a lot of these symptoms start to show up that you mentioned. But I think, like you said, focusing on what are the positives, like what, maybe today you had, going back, I'll keep using the examples we have been using. You had 5 patients who really gave you a hard time, but you had 1 patient who smiled at you and told you what a great job you were doing, and um, said that you made their day. Like, if you can focus on that one person that you're impacting and maybe understand that the other people are hurting themselves and it's not easy for them to find that compassion right now, then that can help. Or focusing on, like you said, hey, right now it feels like this is hopeless and we're not making a difference. Sometimes it feels like that, but let's look objectively at all the ways that we've made progress, whether that be within our company, our team, or just a movement in general. I think focusing on those positives can really make a big difference in reframing because, like you said, I think we do have that negativity bias where it's a lot easier to focus on. Like a classic example is you post something on social media and maybe you get 100 positive comments and you get one negative comment, and we focus on the one negative instead of the 99 positives. I think that's a really common shared experience that highlights the negativity bias. And obviously, again, tying it into social media, we are more likely to click on things that outrage us, make us upset, and that's why they get shown to us, and these algorithms are designed to show us more of the stuff we click on. So if we're clicking on more negative things, that's what's going to get shown to us. So it just becomes a bit of a vicious cycle.
Yeah. Well, I agree with everything you said. And I do think that compassion fatigue, just so everyone listening fully understands too. I believe it is directly related to working with individuals, like working directly with trauma and tying in social media. I think it's just more relatable for everyone, but it is more focused on people who actually do work with trauma. And it's the fault of caring. It's the con of caring too much is, experiencing something like compassion fatigue. But I think social media is a great way for people who don't work in trauma to just have that better understanding of like, okay, this is an example of maybe how it could feel. Um, but yeah, I
Ther-
think that
would a therapist be an example of somebody who would experience compassion fatigue then?
yeah, yeah,
Like with
yeah.
their patients?
Yeah, because they are experiencing the trauma through their patients, especially when the patients are describing something so vividly and so terrible. People in the hospital, people working in animal rights, especially people who are working like in the field, maybe someone in war, someone who's working, with animals like in person or in labs or whatever it is. So yeah, that's a great example. But I think yeah, there's like you said, I think there's great ways to combat it, which is to take care of yourself by trying to which is so like, we hear it all the time, cliche, but it's true. Like trying to focus on some of the positives is really, really beneficial. And of course, not going over the top where you're just dismissing all of your feelings, which I know you would never recommend. But it is important to have the balance of that. And just yeah, take care of yourself. Going to therapy if you can afford it, getting good quality sleep, talking to someone can be really helpful, especially someone that's in your field, because of course they're going to be able to empathize with you a lot more and understand you a lot more than someone maybe outside of your field. But yeah, I think it's a really sucky feeling because, you go into these fields because you care so much, because you wanna help these people or you wanna help the animals, and it's a really, really detrimental feeling to then feel so withdrawn and pulled back from wanting to do these things or listen to these things, read these things, hear about these things, because you wanna help the people, you wanna help the animals, but it's exhausting, it's tiring, and it does take a toll on you, so it's so important to take care of your mental health and physical health, which we're all about that physical health here. But yeah, I think yeah, staying active is helpful. Taking everything else I already said is very helpful. But yeah, I think we hit some great points. I think it's a shorter topic, but it's a needed one because it is prevalent in a lot of people's lives. So I think this was a good one.
Yeah, I think especially because probably a lot of listeners of this podcast work in a field where they're working closely with people, or maybe they just fall more on that end of, yeah, that compassionate side of things. I believe everyone has the capacity to be compassionate, or at least most people, but I think we maybe as vegans or people who care a lot about animals or um, tend to feel that even more strongly in a lot of cases. And
Mhm.
yeah, it can be hard. It can be tricky. I feel like we have hit on most of the major points. Was there anything? One thing I guess I wanted to ask you, and I'm totally fine if there's nothing that comes to mind here. As someone who you said you've experienced this yourself, was there any kind of maybe like unconventional form of self-care that you found like worked for you? Obviously, kind of the basic things that you hit on there in terms of like physical and mental health care. Any kind of like, I guess not tips or tricks, but like think something that you maybe found particularly profound or helpful when it came to compassion fatigue that you were able to kind of implement that has made a difference?
That's a good question.
Mm,
Let me think about that. Well, I'd say first is just really noticing that the compassion fatigue is setting in could be difficult. So just really noticing how you're feeling when you're around patients or around clients or animals, and just noticing, your feelings towards them, your feelings towards others, your feelings inside. Are you feeling super tired, stressed, anxious, sad? Really start to notice those things, how your empathy's maybe shifted. um, and like I said, it doesn't mean that you're gonna be completely withdrawn and have no feelings towards anyone, but your feelings do shift. And I think I was working night shift at the hospital, and that's where I really started to experience it. I think because I was just so tired, I was exhausted. Night shift is really really difficult, and then I was also on like one of the busiest floors, and it was during COVID, so it was just so much going on all the time, and it just becomes completely exhausting where you do care about your patients, of course, but you are just so drained that you just feel like you can't take it anymore. I think what helped me was actually I really started to shift after I read the book The Magic by Rhonda. I don't remember her last name. It's a really woohoo book, but I just freaking loved it, and I felt so like I just felt so good after reading the book. It was definitely just a lot about being more grateful and just experiencing more gratitude towards like in so many different capacities. I think something that was big for me was just noticing being more grateful for every part of the environment around me in the workplace specifically. So I was, starting to show more gratitude towards like the people who are cleaning, the people who, you know, are restocking all of the items, the people who are taking the labs for the patients, the the physical therapist who might have helped that day. And I was just noticing like all these different parts because the hospital doesn't run on, nurses and doctors. There's so many different people who are helping, including like the front desk, that like people who are answering calls and people who are doing all the payment forms and everything like that. And I think that really helped, just really starting to focus on all of these little things that add up to make my job easier, even if it is still feeling very draining and exhausting. I was starting to notice all those other pieces that were tying into it. So that was something I think that is kind of unconventional, I guess. Also just uh not unconventional, but going on lots of walks and listening to some of my favorite songs. I really enjoyed that. Um, yeah, I think those are some those are that would be an unconventional thing. Everything else I would say is pretty basic, like I already said, exercising, therapy, staying busy, hanging out with friends, eating good vegan food like ice cream or a donut here and there.
Definitely eating good vegan food is a one to add to the list there. I felt like that was a really good one, was gratitude. I think was kind of the theme of what you were hitting on, and it's almost counterintuitive because you're like, why should I be grateful for this circumstance that I'm in? And like, oh, I don't have anything to be
Yeah,
grateful for. But gratitude is one of those things where it's like you feel like before you really embrace it, you feel like you're giving something away, but really you're getting something by showing gratitude, which is something that I think it takes practice to realize is like the more gratitude you can find in just simple daily things, the more that you kind of just feel this sense of, at least for myself, like love and compassion and um, yeah, it just makes you feel good. Like, being grateful for things makes you feel good, and even if sometimes I'm like I've gone through periods of times where I don't always journal, but, like, sometimes I'll try to, like, get into a habit of, "Okay, let me just write down, like, one thing I was grateful for today," especially if I'm maybe going through a bit of a tougher time. It helps me to kind of stay grounded and recognize that I am very lucky and blessed to have a lot of things in my life, and even if I'm like, "Oh, I don't wanna journal about this. I'm not grateful for anything." And then I actually think about it, and then I can usually think of like 5 things or 10 things, and I
yeah.
end up feeling a lot better afterwards.
It just expands the more you think about it, 'cause there's just so many little things. It's like, wow. Look at this. I can just move my hand. I don't know how I'm doing it. I'm just doing it. Like how how grateful can we be for little things like that? Having eyesight, having eyebrows. I don't know because I like them. They're just so many little things that do add up over time. So yeah, I think it is definitely like you said one of those things that's like okay, duh, be grateful. But really, if you really think about it, it makes such a difference. And you do feel good, like you said. Like it in the moment, it might be a little annoying to think about, but you feel good when you start to think about things you're grateful for. Like, it's just an automatic energy shift. No matter I think people maybe overuse it, but I don't think you ever could overuse it because honestly, it's a good one to practice.
It is. It is. Anything else you feel like we missed or you wanna, hit on before I guess I can take us out of here?
Um, I guess just take care of yourself, whether you work in any of these industries, if you work in with animals, with clients, patients, etc. Just take care of yourself, and we're here for you. We know it's hard, and we also know you can get through it. So message us, ask us any questions. We're here for you for that.
Yeah, on the theme of gratitude, thank you all for listening. We're grateful for you because we wouldn't be doing this without you. So, if you are finding that you need someone in your corner to help you with figuring out, hey, how do I schedule some time to get these walks in to, take care of myself? How can I prioritize these things? What's important? What's not important? That's what we do at Vegan Proteins. So, reach out to us, veganproteins.com. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching, we offer that. We have our Muscles by Brussels membership as well. Get in touch with us, hit the contact button, veganproteins.com. And thank you for listening to another episode. I'm Ben,
I'm Athena.
and we'll catch you in the next one.
Toodles!